was my first Halloween living in my own house away from my parents. I live in a small corner house with a basement but no upstairs, a house my parents paid half for. It was 11 o'clock at night. I was sitting in the living room watching scary Halloween movies when I found myself getting up to answer a knock at the door. But then I stopped and thought, who could be at the door at 11 p.m.? Surely there were no more trick-or-treaters out. I had a pretty good feeling it was a late-night Halloween ding-dong ditcher, so I gave it a second, then I shot a glance to the porch through the window. They were gone already. Yup, ding-dong ditchers. I sat back down not thinking twice about it, and again, knocking at the front door. "Get lost," I yelled. I was not in the mood for punky kids. They ignored my demand and started pounding now, not just knocking. I was pissed now. I leaped up and swung the door open. No one was there once again. I slipped on my shoes and headed outside to begin searching the bushes for the kids, but there was nobody in sight. Not in the bushes, not behind my car, not across the street. I was done answering. I didn't want to feed into their fun anymore, so I went back inside, double-locked the door, and went to my bedroom, also locking that door, just to feel safer, I guess. Even over the TV, I could still hear the stupid kids pounding on my front door repeatedly. I was so close to calling the cops to get them away, but that would undoubtedly lead to my house being egged or teepeed. The pounding continued for an uncomfortably long time, more than half an hour. I thought these kids must be filming something for YouTube and were desperate for a reaction, but I wasn't going to give it to them. At some point I dozed off with the TV on, only to wake up to the knocking again. I looked at the clock. It was 2 in the fucking morning. How could those kids still be at it, I thought. I turned the TV off and sat up with my ears open. For a few moments, my heart completely stopped as I realized the knocking was not at my front door, but rather at my bedroom door. I jumped out of bed, looking around my room like a madman for something to use as a weapon. They knew I was awake now. They were trying the doorknob, trying to bust down the door. These weren't any kids. By some miracle, I came up with an idea. It was a long shot, but it was all I could think of. I turned on the receiver to my speaker system, plugged in my iPhone, brought up the YouTube app, typed in 45 gunshot sound effect, turned on the volume and pressed play. The sound of a gunshot echoed out of the speakers. It sounded real enough. I paused the video after the first shot and yelled, "That was a warning shot. Leave now or I won't hesitate to shoot you in the head." And it worked. I heard 2 pairs of footsteps stomping over my wood floors and out the front door. I gave it a moment before opening my bedroom door and peeking outside. They were gone, but the front door was left wide open. I quickly shut it, called the police, and that's where my story ended. I was 22 years old, attending a Halloween party at my former best friend Nick's house, who died of a heroin overdose in 2013. Before his death, he would throw big Halloween parties every year at his house, as his parents routinely flew to New York every year to attend their own friend's party. He was always a big Halloween freak, so the whole house was littered with truly horrifying props that we all knew Nick spent way too much money on. He even put up giant walls of cardboard and covered them with wallpapers to create a haunted maze of sorts. I want to keep this story PG-13 rated, so I'll skip the weed, beer, LSD, and sex and get right to the part where things got bad. I'll admit, we weren't in our right minds. None of us were. Anyone who came to Nick's parties knew what went down. Me, Nick, and a few other guys, Vinny G, Joey, and Q, were upstairs in Nick's room smoking a bong when we heard 2 steady, loud bangs come from downstairs. Nick clumsily but panickingly rushed to open the door and see what was going on. There were sounds of screaming of both guys and girls. I remember quite clearly it sounded as if there were a crowd of people screaming for their lives down there. We all called Nick to come back in and shut the door. Even under the influence of drugs, we all knew what was going on. Nick ran back inside and shut the door quickly but also quietly, locking it behind him. He turned to us and had on the facial expression of someone who had just witnessed murder. "What did you see? What's going on?" we all shouted at him. He told us to hide before anything else. We all knew why. From that point on, we didn't ask questions. Nick hid the lights and hid in the closet with Joey, while I hid under the bed with Q, and Vinny G hid in the storage box. We could hear the blasting music from downstairs turn off, followed by a grown man screaming at everyone to shut up. One unfortunate girl let out a scream of shock and fear, and after another bang, silence. The man started shouting at everyone again, but personally I couldn't hear it too well, and I certainly as hell wouldn't remember exactly what he was shouting. We heard 2 other men shouting. By now there were a confirmed 3 intruders in the house, but there could have been more for all we knew at that point. We heard the sound of boots stomping up the stairs and then coming halfway down the hall and stopping outside the bedroom door. The intruder on the other side of the door tried the doorknob, but when he realized it was locked, he started ramming into the door with most likely his shoulder. After a few failed attempts at that, the sound of a few shots to the doorknob were clearly enough to break the lock, allowing the door to swing open. We heard cries from downstairs after the shots to the doorknob, followed by a silencing gunshot. Me and Nick had our hands on our mouths to shield our breathing noises. I watched through the transparent cloth that hung from the bottom of Nick's bed as the black boots with overlapping ripping denim jeans moved instinctively to the closet. He opened the door. I could hear Nick begging for the intruder not to kill him, offering a generous amount of money if they would leave. Nick gave himself up as the house owner. That's when the intruder ordered him downstairs. The rest of us stayed put. Apparently Joey hadn't been caught with Nick. We stayed under the bed, shaking and afraid. There was near silence from downstairs, other than Nick talking with the intruders, but whatever they were saying was much too low for us to hear. It felt like a near 20 minutes before the front door slammed shut and Nick came running back upstairs to tell us that they were gone. I think the most horrifying moment of my life was when I stepped downstairs back into the living room and saw the 2 dead bodies laying lifelessly on the ground, holes in their heads spewing out blood. Jen and Robbie, 2 good friends that I still miss. I'll spare you the details of what happened when the police arrived, but despite the fact that the house smelled like a marijuana greenhouse, the police were more interested in finding out who the masked men were that killed 2 innocent college students. Oh yeah, Nicky told the 4 of us who were hiding in his room that there were 4 intruders in total, all wearing fedoras, vendetta masks, coats, and gloves. They demanded $100,000 in cash, and when Nick could not provide it, they demanded he fill their empty sack with his most valued possessions. All of the partygoers held hostage in the room were also forced to throw their wallets into the sack or they would be shot. After the incident, Nick became depressed. He started drinking too much, becoming an alcoholic. He stopped showing up to school and ultimately ended up dropping out. He started the use of heavier drugs, such as meth and heroin. I had one good talk with him since the incident, and he was more real during this talk than he had ever been. He told me, with tears rolling down his cheeks and a pipe in his hand, he lived in constant pain, knowing he caused the death of 2 of his best friends. Nick died of a heroin overdose in July of 2013, not even a year after the incident.
I guess I should start with a little backstory from my experience to make more sense. It was Halloween in 2005. I was around 4 years old at the time. We had just gotten home from trick-or-treating when my stepfather asked if I wanted to see something scary. I was always a weird kid who absolutely loved horror movies, gore, and all of that. I cannot really say that ever changed now that I'm older. Anyway, he took me into the pitch-black bathroom and told me the story of Bloody Mary. It was the first time I had ever heard the story, and even at 4 years old I laughed it off. He saw that I was not scared, smirked, and ran out of the bathroom, holding the door closed behind him. I begged him to let me out, even screamed when he started chanting. It was there that I felt this presence. It was behind me. When I turned, I just saw this ooze of black coming from the mirror. That is the most scared that I have ever been. What scared me the most, though, was that ooze. It felt like an eternity as I saw this woman, a fully grown woman, crawl out of the mirror. She just looked like a normal person. I was terrified still. That is when I saw her claws. I screamed even louder, until finally my mother opened the door for me. She was already upset at my stepfather for locking me in the bathroom. But when she saw my tear stains and the sheer terror on my now pale face, she was furious. I don't remember the rest, but I know he never tried to do that to me again. Flash forward a few months. I don't remember exactly, but it was after my birthday, and I believe I had just turned 5. For some reason, ever since that incident, I had been seeing things out of the corners of my eye. Always seeing shadows running around, saying hello and waving to people who apparently were not there. Seeing as I was just a toddler at the time, people seemingly wrote it off as an overactive imagination. However, this night, I was able to convince my mother to switch rooms with me. If I watched out for my baby sister, I was okay to sleep alone in there. I was in a dead sleep when I just woke up. I cannot remember if something had woken me up or if it was just a night terror, but I had woken up exactly at 12 a.m. on the dot. Surprisingly, I was wide awake, as if I was never asleep in the first place. I looked over at my sister in her crib and saw that she was still asleep. I was happy I did not wake her up. Then I looked across the hall into my bedroom where my mother was sleeping in my bed. She was still asleep as well, but I had to take a second glance because I thought I saw something. It was in the hallway between us. Shadows running back and forth as if to distract me. Then I saw this black ooze. The same ooze that I saw on Halloween with her. I was silent. I did not know what to do, but this time, I, for some reason, did not feel scared. I was in a way comfortable. I saw the shadow and the ooze rise from her hand and her arm. Her chest to her wrist and her legs were all radiating this stuff. She looked like an old Victorian woman. Her dress was that of a noblewoman in that area. Her hair was done in a beautiful braided bun, and she looked incredibly beautiful. She gracefully walked around my bed to the foot of it and bent over, seemingly upset to see my mother in my bed, almost as if she were wanting to see somebody else there. That is when I made eye contact. I did not notice her turn around and look straight at me. She moved quicker and vanished into the black hallway. I thought she had gotten scared or something. That is when I heard something in our kitchen. This was a small apartment, so for me to hear something in the kitchen was not necessarily weird, but since nobody was awake, it was kind of scary. I thought my mother would have woken up, but she did not. I looked over at my sister, making sure she was still asleep, and to my relief, she was. It only took a quick glance, but when I looked back at the hallway, my heart stopped. There she was. She was bent under the doorframe because of how tall she was. She walked into the room, towards my sister's crib. I figured the woman was simply curious about her. This is when she stopped, and I noticed she had something in her hand. I got terrified. She had a knife. It was not like a normal knife, though. It was shadowy and oozy like she was. I was frozen. She raised up her knife, and I was finally able to scream, "Don't touch her!" I sat straight, with the feeling of how I should not have done that. She stared dead at me, knife still in hand. She turned towards me and started walking around the bed to where I was. She tilted her head to the side and bent down to get closer. This scared the daylights out of me. I do not know why. I don't know if it was the fear of her or the fear of what she was doing, but I was frozen. Maybe it was just the presence of being around her. I finally screamed for my mother. It took until about my 5th scream until my mother rushed in, turning on the light, asking me if I was okay and what was wrong. I was panting and crying, barely able to speak. She could not see her, and she wouldn't believe me. I don't remember the rest of that night. All I know is that I potentially saved my baby sister's life that night. That is still going through my mind now and again. It still freaks me out. I'm nearly 20 years old now, and I have never seen her again. But I do get glances of her every now and again from the corner of my eye, almost as if it was daring me to try to summon her again. All I know is, she is one of the reasons why I see things now, why I believe in the paranormal, and for that, I will remain somewhat grateful.